Welcome again to my channel. This is Trev from Trevessence, and today we are going to continue the reading of the book Grace Under Fire. For those of you who have been with me for the last week as we read this book, I want to say thank you so much for coming. I hope you have been enjoying or listening to the reading as much as I have been enjoying bringing it to you. We are now on to chapter 11 of the book. Let's begin. Isabel watched Michael walk out of the kitchen and felt like throwing her hands up. He is the most aggravating man. She didn't expect Michael's brothers to agree with her and was pleasantly surprised when they both nodded. Determined to put him out of her mind, an almost impossible feat, she ran upstairs to get a bloody flash drive, then placed it in a Ziploc bag and handed it over to Nick. "I've got to go into the office for a little while this afternoon. I'll drop it over then," he said. "If they're slammed, and they usually are, it might be a few days before anyone can get to it. Are you okay with that?" "Of course. You are doing a huge favor for me, and I really appreciate it." While she was still in the kitchen, Dylan showed her the blueprints of the remodel. He had included a large bedroom for her. It was a comfort knowing that Kate and Dylan included her in their plans. However, by the time it was finished, she'd hopefully be making enough money to be out on her own. Dylan and Nick made sandwiches and then headed out. As soon as she was alone, she started cleaning the kitchen. Lucy, the housekeeper, had taken time off but would be back late this afternoon. Isabel wanted the kitchen to be spotless when she arrived, which was no small feat with the brothers constantly digging through the refrigerator and the cabinet looking for food. They acted like bears getting ready to hibernate. The family dinner was tomorrow night, the actual date of their parents' marriage. The menu was set with all of their favorite dishes, and it would be only the immediate family and her. Isabel didn't think she should attend because she wasn't part of the immediate family, but Dylan had insisted. Helping any way she could made her feel as though she was contributing and wasn't taking advantage of the Buchanan's kindness and generosity. She was scrubbing the countertop when Judge Buchanan and his wife walked in. Thrilled to see them, she dropped the sponge and ran to greet them. Mrs. Buchanan, Elizabeth, to her husband and friends, was an elegant lady. The sparkle in her eyes gave her a youthful appearance. The only sign of her years was the short silver hair that framed her face. She was the kind of woman who could wear anything and be the most fashionable woman in the room. Her smile, so warm and genuine, made her even more beautiful. It was obvious to Isabel that both Jordan and Sydney had inherited their grace and elegance from their mother. Judge Buchanan was an older version of his sons. He was as tall as they were and just as handsome as Michael, even at his advanced age. The wrinkles on his face from years of sun and wind while sailing his boat didn't distract from his appearance. In fact, they made him look even more handsome. There was such dignity about him in the way he walked and the way he spoke that there was kindness too. She felt she could talk to the judge about anything, just as she could with Dylan. Well, almost anything. There were probably some things even the judge wouldn't want to discuss, like her sex life. That would probably be a topic to avoid. She could never talk to him or Dylan about that. The mere thought made her shudder. But why would you want to talk to him about that? You. Isabel realized her head was in the clouds again and forced herself to pay attention to what the judge was telling her. Or as Michael would say, she needed to focus on the task at hand. She made iced tea with mint for them and sat in the living room while they told her all about their mini vacation. Isabel noticed they smiled at each other often. The love flowing between them was inevitable, and she was enviable, and she hoped that one day she would experience the same. Now it's your turn, Isabel. Catch up on catch us up on your life, the judge insisted. Anything exciting going on? If you only knew. She smiled, but was safe from answering when Mrs. Buchanan said, "You'll soon be on your way to Scotland, won't you?" "Yes, I'm going to see the land my great uncle left me. I talked to the solicitor in Dunross, Scotland, who's handling the inheritance, so I'll be meeting with him. I really don't know much about it except that it's a very large piece of land in the Highlands. I'll be going next week as long as there aren't any setbacks. I guess you could say there have been a few glitches." "Glitches?" Michael laughed after repeating the word as he strode into the living room. "That's code for not wishing to discuss this now, Michael," she said through a clenched smile. "Your parents just returned home. It's a festive occasion. Dear God." She had almost called him a jerk in front of his parents. What was the matter with her? From the way Michael was looking at her, she was pretty sure he had guessed she had almost blurted out something inappropriate about him. "If you'll excuse me, I need to attend to something upstairs." She didn't give enough time to answer her questions but rushed up to the bedroom she was now thought of as her hideaway. As lovely and kind as the Buchanans were, Isabel changed her mind about not staying at the Hamilton. There she wouldn't face the risk of running into Michael all the time. Even being in the same room with him made her nervous. Michael would have a good laugh if he knew how easily he rattled her. One kiss and she was ready to rip her clothes off, and his. She was in over her head, and Michael, he couldn't care less about her. That little kiss hadn't fazed him, the big jerk. Enough already. She didn't want to think about him any longer. Keeping busy was the solution. With that notion in mind, she opened her laptop and began to answer her emails. It took a long while, and she was about to close up when another email appeared. This one was from Xavier. She was almost afraid to open it. Her immediate thought was that he had changed his mind and no longer wanted her to sing, which would have been a disappointment, but also a big relief. Just thinking about getting up on stage in front of thousands of people terrified her. There was another worry too. What if he changed his mind and no longer wanted to buy her song? That would be devastating. "Just open the thing," she whispered. The message Xavier sent was upbeat, telling her how eager he was to meet her. He also included a clip of his onstage singing the song he wanted Isabel to sing with him. He thought she might want to work on it. On Thursday, they'd sing it together as many times as necessary to get it the way he wanted. He also explained that he had reserved a seat overlooking the stage for her family and friends. His assistant just needed to know the number of tickets Isabel would need. He had his assistant's email address and ended his email with his full name. Her thought to keep quiet about Xavier and let the focus be on the parents' celebration wasn't possible now. Isabel would tell all of them tonight, she decided. The next order of business was for Isabel to man up, as Dylan would say, and watch the video of her shooting that horrible man. She found the text the woman on the street had sent and activated the video. As she watched it, she paid close attention to Detective Walt tumbling into her arms. Just as she had suspected, he was mumbling something to her, but she couldn't make out what he was saying. "Isabel?" Michael knocked on the door and said her name again. "Come in." He opened the door and said, "Do you still want to see Detective Walt?" "Yes, I do." "Now?" "Yes, now." She didn't know why Michael was suddenly being accommodating, but she wasn't going to question his motive if it meant he'd take her to Walt. "Give me 5 minutes." I'll meet you downstairs. It took her 15 minutes to change. At her request, the bell captain had put her suitcase for Scotland in storage, and most of the clothes she had brought in her backpack were meant for a casual visit to Nathan's Bay. But thankfully, she had thought to pack a couple of dresses. She quickly changed into a yellow cotton sundress and hurried downstairs. Michael had changed too. Instead of jeans, he wore khaki pants and a button-down shirt with the cuff turned back. Even when he didn't try, he looked gorgeous. When they reached the hospital, they cut through the emergency waiting room to get to the elevator. The ICU was quiet. A nurse wearing a name tag that said Terry was behind the desk. The second Isabel introduced herself, the nurse's face lit up. As she led them down the hall towards his room, she gushed. I took your advice, and you were right, she said. I did overreact. John and I had a long talk, and we have decided to keep the dog, Flubber and all. I'm glad it worked out for you, Isabel said. A uniformed policeman stood by Walsh's door. When they identified themselves, he told them Samuel had authorized their visit, and he let them pass. A multitude of tubes and wires were hooked up to the poor man. The nurse explained that the breathing apparatus had been removed, and he was breathing on his own now. There were other improvements as well, but he was still unconscious, and everyone was anxious for him to open his eyes. Isabel thought he looked peaceful in sleep, and yet she still wanted to shake him to help him to wake up. She didn't give in to the temptation, thank goodness, not only because it would be wrong to manhandle a patient, but also because the guard was giving her suspicious looks. Later, that same guard was telling her how he was drowning in debt. All she had done to elicit such a lengthy declaration was to thank him for watching out for Detective Walsh and ask him if this was his usual duty. Isabel listened to his worries for a good 10 minutes before he finished. She shook his hand, wished him well, and was ready to leave. But then one of the orderlies wanted to chat with her as well. Michael guessed it was going to take a while, so he leaned back against the wall with arms crossed and waited. He couldn't figure out why people were so prone to unload their problems on her. She didn't hand out any wisdom. As to that, she didn't say much of anything. She usually engaged them in conversation, chatting amicably about mundane things. Once they started talking, she just listened and nodded every now and again. Michael noticed that everyone who talked to her walked away smiling. It was, in his opinion, the strangest thing he had ever seen, and it kept happening over and over again. People were drawn to her just like he was, though he sure as certain wasn't going to pour his heart out to her. He had to drag her out of the hospital, or they never would have left. Why are you in such a hurry? She asked, trying to keep up with him as they walked down the hospital corridor. I have things to do, he said. She checked the time and then said, do you have plans tonight? Yes, I do, he said. No further explanation, just a simple yes. She guessed what that meant. He had a date, probably with that lawyer, Amanda something or the other. She wasn't going to bill him. If he didn't want to tell her, she wasn't going to nag. That nurse. Michael began as he turned the key in the car's ignition. What nurse? The one behind the desk. You mean Terry? She said, turning towards him. What about her? What did you talk to her about? I've talked to her several times on the phone, she explained. I'd called to check on Detective Walsh, and she answered. She's a lovely woman, isn't she? Yes, sure, he said. She thanked you for all your advice, but you didn't give her any, did you? I asked her how her day was going, and she told me. He shook his head. It's the darndest thing. What is? That people need someone to listen to them. There are lots of lonely people in the world who don't have anyone to turn to. You wouldn't understand because you come from such a big family. If you need anything, you can turn to your brothers or your sisters, and you have your parents who love you. I hope you realize how fortunate you are. He glanced over at her and said, yeah, I do realize how fortunate I am. What about you? Were you lonely growing up? No, not at all, she replied. I was very close to my mother. And your sisters? Yes, but they weren't around all that much, were they? Kira was away at college and medical school, and Kate was away at college, then got a graduation degree in business. Okay, no, they weren't home at all that often, but I knew they would be there if I needed them. Several minutes passed in silence, and then Michael said, were they home when your mother got sick? Off and on, she answered. Towards the end, our Aunt Nora moved in to help. He nodded. I understand now. Understand what? You have you have tremendous empathy for others, and that's why they're drawn to you. They? Who are you talking about? Terry the nurse, he said, and the orderly. What was he telling you? He looked agitated. His name is Cruz, and he was upset. He told me he's one of 6 children, and their single mother raised them. Now she's sick, and none of them want to take care of her. The more he talked, the more he realized that her children have an obligation to take care of her. What do you think? Brothers and sisters and parents should be loyal to one another, no matter what. He reached over and put his hand on top of hers. I agree. Michael was slowly beginning to realize how much he liked being with Isabel. When he first met her at Dylan's wedding and wasn't trying his darnest to avoid her, he had thought her opinion were naive. But now he realized how strong her character was. He had learned not to trust anyone but his family and his two teen brothers. Trust was unconditional with all of them. Outsiders weren't to be trusted. In his past line of work, that was the reason he stayed alive. Do you trust Dylan unconditionally? He asked. Yes, I do. There wasn't any hesitation at all. Do you trust me unconditionally? Yes, again, no hesitation. Before he could gloat, and Isabel was sure that he would, she added a caveat. And I can't give you a reason why. On one hand, Isabel aggravated the hell out of him, and on the other, she made him feel good. His only explanation was that his reactions to her were just plain crazy. I'm not going to ask if you trust me unconditionally, she continued, because I know the answer. You're too cynical to trust anyone out of your core group. He didn't disagree. Instead, he changed the subject. There's the bridge. There's the bridge to home. Notice the sign on that post? Yes. What does it say? Here we go again. Isabel silently groaned. Do not pass. The sign says do not pass. Michael, are we going to argue again? Fortunately, her cell phone rang before he could get worked up, thinking about their near misses while she was driving. She didn't bother to see who was calling. A minute later, she wished she had. James Reed was on the line, and he was even more eager than the last time he had called. She decided to share the conversation with Michael and put Reed on speakerphone. You don't want to miss out on this fantastic opportunity, Miss McKenna. Really, you don't. The price the Patterson Group will pay is quite high. He added, yes, it is. You won't get that much from anyone else, but you must act now. The deal could go away, he warned. And we don't want that to happen. Isabel thought Mr. Reed sounded like a spokesman in a late-night television infomercial. I can't make a decision yet. I'd like to see the land first. His tone suddenly changed, and now he sounded sincerely concerned. Miss McKenna, it would be most awkward if you were to come. Most awkward. She looked at Michael and rolled her eyes. James Reed was given to drama, she decided. And what is that? You won't be welcome. To most of the people around Glen McKenna, you are a pretender and don't deserve the land. They'll be hostile towards you. Why would you want to be put in that situation? It would be dangerous for you. Sell it now and be rid of the worry. She kept her voice pleasant. You have given me quite a lot to think about. As soon as I make a decision, I'll let you know. When? When will that be? As soon as I make a decision, I'll let you know. Bye now. He was blabbering when she disconnected the call. Arriving back at Nathan's Day, Michael parked the car and rushed around to open the door for Isabel, but she was already heading to the house. See you later, she called over her shoulder. Isabel had to get away from him. One minute she was arguing with him, and the next she was sharing her personal thoughts. She was suddenly feeling overwhelmed with frustration and confusion. She never should have come to Nathan's Day. If she had had an inkling of how she would react to Michael, she would have gone home after graduation and flown to Scotland from there. Lust, she decided, was a terrible affliction, and she wanted no part of it. Needing to get rid of some of her nervous energy, she changed into her workout clothes to go for a run. Unfortunately, she didn't realize how hot the weather was until she was out in it. The sun beat down on her, and she was drenched with sweat by the time she returned to the house. A cold shower revived her. She put on a different pair of shorts and a tank top, found her flip-flops, and went downstairs. She found Kate on the front porch sipping iced tea. Her long hair was up in a ponytail, and she was fanning herself with a magazine. The second she spotted Isabel, she started talking. How long were you in the sun? You've got a sunburn. Did you use sunscreen? Of course I did, he answered. I want to talk to you about. There was a pause. It was as it was as far as he got before Kate launched into her day. I wish you had gone with us. I know you hate shopping, but you would have had a lot of fun. We stopped at Hamilton for lunch, and there's this fantastic women's clothing shop in the back, near the promenade. It's called the Madison, she added. I swear I wanted every dress. There were several that Reagan and I thought you would look stunning in, so Reagan put a hold on them and added quite a few casual outfits for you to try on. We'll go Thursday afternoon. You need a new wardrobe now that you're out of college. I also purchased $10,000 in second account this morning. You need it for your expenses. Wait, just because you and Dylan have money doesn't mean you should support me. I'm not going to be a charity case. I'm giving the money back. No, it's a gift, Isabel. You are my sister. Dylan and I want to help. Just say thank you, for God's sake. Isabel couldn't get her back up because Kate was being so sweet. Thank you, she said. How long will the shop hold the clothes? As long as Reagan wants them to, Kate answered. The Madisons owned by the Hamilton, and the Hamilton hotels are owned by. There was a long pause. Reagan and their brothers, Isabel said. I am going to need some clothes, she admitted then. Most of my wardrobe in college was blunt. I do have two nice dresses. I wore the blue one when I went to the club and sang. We'll have fun, Kate promised. I'm with you. I've missed you, and the last couple of weeks have been crazy with work. It's nice to kick back and relax, don't you think? Thursday isn't going to work for me. Any chance we could go tomorrow? I could make it work. What's going on Thursday? Isabel got up from her chair and went over to the porch swing. It looked so inviting. You aren't going to believe me, but I swear I'm telling the truth. Kate frowned. What you do? How like Kate to assume that Isabel had screwed up. Of course, the assumption was based on the fact that there had been more than a few times that she had, in fact, screwed up. Do you know who EXO is? She didn't give her sister time to answer, but continued on. He called me. I'm rehearsing with him Thursday afternoon, and Friday night I'm performing with him at the garden. She laughed then and said, Kate, your mouth is wide open, and you look like you've seen a ghost. It took a few minutes for Kate to react. Once it sank in, she shouted. She was so excited. Oh, please, let there when you tell Lauren, she begged. She's going to die when she hears about this. And Reagan will flip. And oh my God, Isabel. Isabel patiently waited while her sister rambled on, and then blurted, "Hey, I'm so nervous about meeting him." Kate didn't downplay or make light of Isabel's worries. "I'd be in a panic too, I think, walking on the stage with thousands of people watching. Maybe you can figure out a way to block them and concentrate on your song." "I wish I could come up with something better," she admitted. "And even though I know you won't believe me, I think you're going to be a phenomenon. Mom would be so proud of you." "I'm not so sure of that." Before Kate could argue, she told her about a promise their mother had her made before she died. Kate became teary-eyed. "Oh, Isabel, why didn't you tell Kara and me? You sang all the time, and I never could understand why you let it go when you went off to college. Now I realize what you sacrificed. I'm so sorry. Mother shouldn't have asked you to give up what you love. Music is part of who you are. Mother was worried I wouldn't be able to support myself. I don't think she had a lot of faith in me. I know she didn't want me in what she called a cutthroat business. Towards the end, she was afraid, and I would have agreed to anything to give her peace." She took a breath and said, "It's been over 5 years and I still miss her." "I miss her too," Kate said. The two sisters spent several minutes reminiscing about some of the happy times they had with their mother. "We never could take anything over her," Kate said, a note of pride in her voice. They were laughing over one particular plan Isabel had hatched when Raven came out to join them. Her reaction to Isabel's news about Xavier was as enthusiastic as Kate has been, and she agreed they needed to go back to the clothing boutique tomorrow for Isabel. "Where's your aunt?" Kate asked. She'll freak out when she hears this. She and Nick went home to be with the kids. They'll be back tomorrow with Samantha and Tommy for family dinner." Isabel sat quietly while the two women discussed what she should wear to rehearse with EXO, and what she should wear on stage. Every time EXO's name came up, Isabel could feel her stomach tightening. She wasn't sure if it was due to excitement or anxiety. When she wasn't worrying about EXO, she was thinking about Michael. He had been clouding her thoughts since she had arrived in Boston. What was he doing now? She wondered, barely stopping herself from asking her sister. She really needed to get a grip. Scotland was looking better and better. If she could, she'd leave tonight. Later that evening, Michael waited until Isabel had left the living room to talk to the others about safety concerns, and it was decided that Nick would accompany her to the rehearsal with Xavier. Noah would let Nick know their plans as he called to check in. It was up to Michael to let Isabel know what was decided. She was out in the sunroom, curled up on the sofa with her pen and notepad in hand. He stood just inside the doorway watching her. He noticed every little thing about her. Her legs were a bit sunburned, and so were her arms and her face. Her hair had white blonde streaks in it now, and he remembered how silky it felt. Hell, he was in it again. "Isabel," he said her name as he walked over to the sofa and sat down next to her. She moved their feet out of the way in the nick of time. "There are other places to sit in this room, you know. I like sitting here." She refused to get into an argument over such a silly thing. "Did you want something?" "Yes," he said. "Nick is going to go with you to the rehearsal, and if I can move a couple of appointments, I'm going to tag along." "Why?" "We want to meet him." "What's the real reason, though?" "We decided that Nick We decided that Nick could go with you because he carries a badge and a gun." "Why is that important?" She was looking at him as though she thought he had lost his mind. "We don't know anything about Xavier and his crew. His staff," she corrected. "Okay, staff," he patiently repeated. Better safe than sorry. In other words, if anyone tries something, you can shoot him or use contempt. That sounded good to him. Whose wacky idea was this? She asked. And before he could come up with an answer, she guessed. It was yours, wasn't it? He shrugged, then decided to justify his actions. You don't know anything about these people. So yes, I did suggest it. That you and Nick intimidated everyone? Okay. Yes, that was exactly what we wanted to do. I don't want anyone messing with you. She couldn't make up her mind if he was being sweet or insulting. She placed her notepad and pen on the table and stood. Crossing her arms, she said, I can take care of myself, Michael. She turned to leave, then changed her mind. And another thing, you told me to stay away from me, and you were going to stay away from me. Do you remember? So how come every minute I turn around, there you are? You might as well stop trying to drive me crazy. Thanks to you, I'm already there. With those parting words, she stormed out. That's the end of chapter 11, my friend. And Isabel and Michael are getting even more and more attracted to each other. I believe I believe they really are in love, but they are going to continue this bantering on each other until eventually somebody, one of them, takes it to the next level. And I think it's going to be Michael. I think he really wants to be with her, but he has more questions than answers, and he is trying to be as polite and gentlemanly as he possibly can in circumstances. Because already his brother is married to her sister. So what are the odds that he's going to get married to the other sister? That I think is what is conflicting in his mind. But we will find out as we read along. When we come back tomorrow, we will read chapter 12 of the book, Grace on the Fire. Once again, I want to say thanks to you all for coming in. I sincerely enjoy reading this book to you, and I hope you all enjoy listening. Until next time, my friends, this is Trevessence, where your journey matters.